Hello everybody, we are gathered here today to discuss one of the biggest screw-ups in UFC history. No, not him. No, not him either. Yes, Paul Semtex Daly, a once promising UFC title contender having things turned for the absolute worst. In a fight to decide the number one contender, Paul decided to, after the bell rings, throw a wild sucker punch at Josh Koscheck. He clearly lost on the scorecards 30-27 after an impressive wrestling performance from Josh. But let's take a look at why Paul did this, what led up to this, and who Paul really is. As many of you know, Paul was born in England to two Caribbean parents. But what you may not know is that Paul actually had no interest in fighting at a young age. Instead, he took an interest to soccer, with his favorite player being someone you may know, may not know, not too famous of a guy, Michael Jordan. He was a true inspiration to Paul, and would later play a big factor in his life. However, at the age of 8, Paul decided to take a turn in his life. He took up karate, his first martial art. And after a couple years, after he was done catching flies out of the air, breaking wood, and fighting off bullies, Paul decided to take up a real martial art, Muay Thai. This is where everything began to change for him and where he really found his love and passion for fighting. However, things had to be put on hold. There were more important matters at hand. You see, Paul enrolled in the military, and there he served 5 years, fighting with the likes of Winston Churchill and the Queen of England, who are to this day big fans of the UFC and can be spotted at events around the world. Anyways, after returning from the wars, the brutal battles and beatings he took alongside his boy Winston, Paul decided to make his professional debut in 2003. He began his professional career going just a measly 2-2, but he would still sign with promotion Cage Rage. There, he would see his career begin to flourish, improving his record to 16-6, with a couple fights in Pancrase and Strikeforce. But one of the biggest and most notable wins was his win to obtain the Cage Rage welterweight championship against Ross Mason. Some other notable wins, or rather two notable draws for the welterweight championship, were against Abdul Mohammed and Paul the Black Beast Jenkins. After this, Paul decided to take his career into his own hands. He signed with promotion Bare Knuckle FC, the biggest promotion in the world. Yes, it was a big deal, but it would be the biggest challenge of his career. He was facing the GOAT, the greatest of all time, Artem Lobov. It was a tough fight for Paul. Everybody knew it. A real test in his career, and honestly, a fight that nobody wanted to take. Ultimately, Paul would lose that fight. But he would continue his career to fight the likes of Dwayne Ludwig in Strikeforce, like I mentioned. This brings us to a point in Paul's career where he began jumping around a few promotions. With fights in Maximum Fighting Championship, Elite XC, and even King of the Cage, Paul was able to amass a record of 7-2. With a notable loss, yes, a loss, I know, but notable, to our boy Jake Shields for the Elite XC Championship. But after this was all said and done, that record was still enough for our Tomato Man, Dana White, to sign him and bring him to the UFC, where this story really begins. This brings us to Paul's UFC career. He was first scheduled to fight Brian Foster on the UFC 103 prelims, but this would quickly change, as Mike Swick would be injured in training and would then be replaced by Paul Semtex Daly for his fight against Martin Kampmann. A tough UFC-ranked opponent for Paul. A fight that would be dangerous for any UFC rookie, to be quite honest. But Paul did not disappoint. He came out guns absolutely blazing, just like in the army with his boy Winston. With a big first round TKO, Paul put his name on the map, and on our Tomato Man's map, Dana as well. He would then be scheduled to fight Carlos Condit. That's right, the natural-born killer. This fight would unfortunately break out after Carlos suffered an injury, just like Mike, in training. He would be replaced by Dustin Hazlitt, and after some tough weight problems, Paul would miss weight for this fight and would be agreed to at a catch weight of 172. However, this weight cut had little to no effect on our boy Paul. He would come out and starch, and I mean starch, Dustin with a huge right hand in the first round, follow up with some ground and pound, and tuck him nicely to sleep. And this would set the scene for the fight that would change Paul's career forever and what this video is really all about. The story begins at UFC 113, a fight that would decide the number one contender, and would be fighting George St. Pierre, just the GOAT, for the undisputed welterweight championship. A pretty big deal if you would ask me. But after a poor performance, Paul would go on to do the absolute unthinkable. He would sneak behind Madison Square Garden, as it says here, and throw a dolly into a Greyhound bus filled with not only fighters, but media personnel as well. He would have injured 10 plus fighters, including the likes of Michael Chiesa and Rose Namajunas, and would face charges in criminal court. Tony, man, what is this?
Man, that's literally what you asked.
Put the camera down, man. I told you how many times. Do better research, man. You're embarrassing me in front of... No, put the camera down.
Dude, stop making the scene, man. Stop.
What is this? Is this a joke to you? Is this a joke to you? Seriously.
No, I just thought it would be funny.
I don't want to hear it, man. Okay. All right, let's wrap this up, all right? All right, what actually happened, and listen, I'm sorry, guys. Tony, the intern, he messes up sometime. We got the good research now. We got everything sorted out. Don't worry. What actually happened was, after the fight, a frustrating one for the striker and Semtex Daily, Paul decided to throw an absolute missile of a sucker bomb straight aiming for Josh Koscheck's chin. I mean, this makes me speechless. Not a lot of things make me speechless, but listen, hey, take a look. Take a look. Tony, man. There we go. Take a look. And listen, guys. Dana, the tomato, was furious. Furious as could be. I mean,
follow up on that incident. He's done. I don't give a shit if he's the best 170-pounder in the world. He'll never come back here again.
And it's understandable. Dana wanted Paul out. And he was. But what was Paul's defense for this? What did he say? Well, originally Paul said, after Dana stormed that octagon, beat Red to the head, Paul said he hadn't heard the bell. He said, hey, Dana, your bell ain't working properly. I couldn't hear it. I thought the fight was still going on. But later on, Paul would admit he heard that bell. He heard it loud and clear, just like as if it was recess back in England. Instead, Paul claimed that he was talking some trash back and forth with Josh throughout the whole fight. And one of the things he said was that he said, hey, Josh, buddy, when we stand up, I'm going to sock you right in your jaw. And hey, let's be honest. He was a man of his word. When they stood up, he socked him right in that jaw piece. If you ask me, I think it's pretty fucked up. Suckering anybody is a pretty low blow in my opinion. Even if your name is Paul Semtex Daily and you're fighting the guy in Josh Koscheck. I mean, he might be one of the most punchable guys in UFC history. I mean, I wouldn't punch him. Matter of fact, if I saw him in the street, I would probably let him punch me. And if he took my wife, I would say, hey, go ahead, take her. I'm not going to stop you. I mean, guys, it's UFC fighter Josh Koscheck. But besides the point, it was messed up. And Paul was done. Never back in the UFC. He then fought in the likes of Strikeforce, some other promotions, with notable fights against the likes of Jorge Masvidal, the guy that slept Ben Askren and Darren Till. And even Nick Diaz. He lost, and Tyron Woodley lost that too, but still big fights, and mostly Strikeforce, until he found his home in Bellator. The retirement home of UFC fighters. We get it. You fight trash cans, get paychecks. You know, who am I to judge? And to his credit, he's yet to sucker punch a single guy there. So, hey, it's a pretty good home. Anyways, thank you for watching, you four beautiful people, and I'll see you next time.